Okay, so we've now got up to Prime Minister number 33, and I've tried to be consistent with this. Some of my earlier Prime Ministers, you'll notice, have been a bit fragmented because they're here and there, all over the place. With this, tried to be a little bit more consistent, and I'll try to do that right up to the end. Um, Number 33, Arthur Balfour. Balfour succeeded his uncle, the Marquess of Salisbury, in 1902 and was Prime Minister for a relatively brief period until 1905. Actually, on the outset, I'll just say an interesting side note. The expression "Bob's your uncle" came from the notion of bias that Balfour faced when he was chosen. Well, I'm not saying it was a major scandal, but it's the notion that he was, Bob's your uncle. Robert Cecil, the Marquess of Salisbury, hence Bob's your uncle. He became Prime Minister. So that's where that expression comes from. Balfour is one of those rare prime ministers who's actually better known in another ministerial role, in his case as Foreign Secretary, because he helped to draft the Balfour Declaration in, I believe it was 1918, which eventually paved way for the creation of the State of Israel. So Balfour is a pretty controversial character in the Middle East, and needless to say, he's not the last British Prime Minister to be so. He was a conservative, and perhaps like his uncle, he had a somewhat distant manner. I'm just going to read out some information here. He was born in 1848 at Whittingham in East Lothian, near Edinburgh, and this speech is attributed to him. I am more or less happy when being praised, not very comfortable when being abused, but I have moments of uneasiness when being explained. Arthur James Balfour succeeded his uncle Lord Salisbury, who had been his political mentor and champion. However, his initial interests were not political. He enjoyed music and poetry and was first known as a renowned philosopher, publishing a defense of philosophic doubt, the foundations of belief of theism and humanism. So Balfour gives the impression of being a highly intelligent man, but maybe not the best at political tectonics. In 1874, he was elected the Conservative Member of Parliament for Hertford. 4 years later, he became Private Secretary to Lord Salisbury, then Foreign Secretary in Disraeli's government. Just to continue, in 1885, Balfour was a member of Randolph Churchill's Fourth Party Group, distinct from the Conservatives, Liberals, and Irish Nationalists, which brought down William Ewart Gladstone's government with the motion opposing the Home Rule Bill for Ireland. It was thought that Balfour was merely entertaining himself with politics. Indeed, the House did not take him quite seriously. Members looked upon him as just a young member of the governing classes who remained in the House because it was the proper thing for a man of his family to do. Later on, he joined the cabinet as Secretary for Scotland and then for Ireland under Lord Salisbury. Despite widespread doubt that he was up to a demanding job of Irish Secretary, Balfour proved to be a tough incumbent. Bear in mind that Ireland at this time was a very topical issue, restoring the rule of law. His land development legislation was considered well judged and has been credited with calming the Irish conflict for a generation. In 1891, Balfour became First Lord of the Treasury and Leader of the Commons. That's an interesting thing, because like I say, in most cases, First Lord of the Treasury was conterminous with the Prime Minister, but Salisbury chose not to be First Lord of the Treasury. He regained the same positions of the Conservatives' re-election in 1895. When Salisbury retired, Balfour became Prime Minister, but his cabinet split on the free trade issue and his relations with the King were poor. Defeats in the Commons and a by-election led to his resignation in December 1905. In the Liberal landslide that followed, Balfour lost his own seat, but returned via a by-election soon after. He continued to lead his party until 1911, but despite stepping down, his career was far from over and he became First Lord of the Admiralty in the wartime coalition, then Foreign Secretary. At the time he wrote a letter which became known as the Balfour Declaration, stating the government's view to favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for Jewish people, on the understanding nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. For the greater part of the 1920s, he was Lord President of the Council until Stanley Baldwin's government fell in 1929. He had always been a delicate and poorly man, so he was physically quite weak, and he died the following year from circulatory failure. He was Bear with me a second. He was 81 when he died in 1930 in Woking, Fisher's Hill House. So that is Balfour. Um, One important thing I actually didn't mention in that Downing Street article was the signing of the Entente Cordiale in 1902. And that was basically a very important act with France, although I think King Edward VII also played a large role in that. This was the Edwardian period, incidentally. Technically, the Edwardian period was technically only 1901 to 1910. So he was first of four prime ministers in the Edwardian period. He was the first prime minister of the 20th century, but not the first to see in the 20th century because Salisbury's administration had went into the year 1902. Um, there was something known as the Balfour Manor, which was basically a sort of mannerism he was said to have that was very unique. And I'm going to describe that. Um, it was known to friends as a Balfourian manner. Said it was um, well, actually, there's a long article on that. I'm going to leave it there, but let's just say it was a rather unusual mannerism that he had. Um, Churchill compared Balfour to Asquith. The difference between Balfour and Asquith is that Arthur is wicked and moral, whilst Asquith is good and immoral. Balfour said of himself, "I'm more," and that's a thing I've already quoted. So yeah, the Entente Cordiale with France actually played an important role in Britain's later decisions in World War One, and was pretty controversial at the time with Germany. Some major acts during his time: the Unemployed Workmen Act of 1905, which established distress committees to give out single grants to businesses or local authorities in order to allow them to hire more workers to decrease the number of unemployed; and the Education Act of 1902, which abolished school boards and then handed over their duties to local borough or council borough as local government education authorities. Um, that is Arthur Balfour. I'll leave it there.